Good evening, everybody. Yes, good evening, thank you, that's nice. Interactive, that's what we like. Is everyone sitting comfortably? Everyone's got a seat, good. Thank you, it's brilliant to see you all here tonight. Welcome to this very special evening hosted by Fiji's COP23 presidency. These are the Talanoa Talks, direct from the Royal Institution in London, and a warm welcome to our audience here, but also our audience who are watching the live stream. We won't forget about you, you're very, very important to us. And it's great to see so many young people here. I know that makes me sound really old, but it is really, really great. My heart does a little dance. Now, buildings carry stories too. Tonight's all about stories. And this one, well, it's hard to know where to begin with this one, really. This is where the science community has grappled with some of humanity's biggest challenges, presented evidence and opportunities and solutions. It's where Faraday demonstrated electricity for the first time. So it seems entirely apt that the Talanoa Talks have arrived here tonight on the eve, or very nearly the eve, of COP24. So here's a recap. I've been asked to give you a little bit of context. Beginning next Monday, political leadership from all over the world gathers in Poland for COP24. This latest round of talks will set the future direction of travel for the world and therefore our collective future. The International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, is the leading scientific body that assesses climate change and recently issued a special report. It showed that time is running out for the world to achieve the vision set by the Paris Agreement. What is that vision? Well, we know it's to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial age. Beyond that, of course, the effects of climate change will significantly worsen. The scientists of the IPCC concluded that this target is still possible, but the window of opportunity is closing fast. So to say this is a critical moment is a bit of an understatement. We are poised, ready to take massive and radical change to human systems, precisely because we are directed by the science. To achieve that, we have this framework, the architecture, if you like, and it's pretty clever stuff. Just to recap again, December, Paris 2015, COP21, and a landmark agreement to combat climate change and to accelerate and intensify the actions and investments needed for a sustainable low-carbon future was reached. We call it the Paris Agreement, as we know, and for the first time, it brought all nations together in a common cause. I always say this, the Paris Agreement is an amazing bit of architecture, but we need to use it. Make no mistake, the current commitments on the table are not good enough. They leave us on course for 3 degrees of warming by the end of the century. Now, 1.5 to 3 degrees doesn't sound like much, but these figures are the difference between success and failure, survival and catastrophe. And of course, not just for Homo sapiens, for every living thing on this planet. It has become clear that there are those who want us to lower our ambitions and higher that number. And we know that means compromising our futures, so we're not going to do it. So how do we maintain and amplify our climate ambition and keep our ambition intact? Well, Fiji has an answer. In November last year, it became the first small island state to preside over the UN climate negotiations, assuming the presidency of COP23. And for the last year, led by Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama of Fiji, Fiji has overseen the Talanoa Dialogue, a global conversation and a process of listening to other people's stories. The Talanoa Dialogues acknowledge, as Frank Bainimarama has put it, that we are all in the same canoe. They also recognize that as humans, we trade and we swap stories, not numbers of atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gas, although they do inform our stories. Talanoa is a chance to pool our collective experiences and knowledge to find solutions. Whether it be poetry or a podium-thumping polemical, other humans have fed their experiences and responses into the Talanoa Dialogue from across the planet. And tonight, we feed into Talanoa right here at the Royal Institution on the eve of COP24. Tonight, you will hear climate ambition articulated in many different ways by a number of great human beings. I invite you to listen, to absorb, and let this process recharge your own wells of energy and commitment, which are possibly a little depleted at this point. Don't worry. Get yourself ready to participate and commit like you never have before. This is what we call an opportunity. So to begin, please welcome actor Ralph Fiennes.
Thank you. I'm going to read 2 poems. The first is by Philip Larkin, called Going, Going. I thought it would last my time, the sense that beyond the town there would always be fields and farms where the village louts could climb such trees as were not cut down. I knew there'd be false alarms in the papers about old streets and split-level shopping, but some have always been left so far. And when the old part retreats as the bleak high-risers come, we can always escape in the car. Things are tougher than we are, just as Earth will always respond however we mess it about. Chuck filth in the sea, if you must. The tides will be clean beyond. But what do I feel now? Doubt? Or age, simply? The crowd is young in the M1 cafe. The kids are screaming for more. More houses, more parking allowed, more caravan sites, more pay. On the business page, a score of spectacled grins approve some takeover bid that entails 5% profit and 10% more in the estuaries. Move your work to the unspoilt dales, grey area grants. And when you try to get near the sea in summer, it seems just now to be happening so very fast. Despite all the land left free, for the first time I feel somehow that it isn't going to last, that before I snuff it, the whole boiling will be bricked in, except for the tourist parts. First slum of Europe, a role it won't be hard to win with a cast of crooks and tarts. And that will be England gone. The shadows, the meadows, the lanes, the guild halls, the carved choirs. There'll be books. It will linger on in galleries, but all that remains for us will be concrete and tires. Most things are never meant. This won't be, most likely. But greeds and garbage are too thick strewn to be swept up now, or invent excuses that make them all needs. I just think it will happen soon. And this is a poem by Wendell Berry called A Poem on Hope. It is hard to have hope. It is harder as you grow old, for hope must not depend on feeling good, and there's the dream of loneliness at absolute midnight. You also have withdrawn belief in the present reality of the future, which surely will surprise us. And hope is harder when it cannot come by prediction any more than by wishing. But stop dithering. The young ask the old to hope. What will you tell them? Tell them at least what you say to yourself. Because we have not made our lives to fit our places, the forests are ruined, the fields eroded, the streams polluted, the mountains overturned. Hope, then, to belong to your place by your own knowledge of what it is that no other place is. And by your caring for it as you care for no other place, this knowledge cannot be taken from you by power or by wealth. It will stop your ears to the powerful when they ask for your faith, and to the wealthy when they ask for your land and your work. Be still and listen to the voices that belong to the stream banks and the trees and the open fields. Find your hope then on the ground under your feet. Your hope of heaven, let it rest on the ground underfoot. The world is no better than its places. Its places at last are no better than their people, while their people continue in them. When the people make dark the light within them, the world darkens. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, that was beautiful. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our host this evening, the Prime Minister of Fiji and President of COP23, Frank Bainimarama.
Sorry about that. Bula, everyone. Bula. So nice to see many of you here, and especially the young people. Especially nice to see a lot of Fijians. Bula, Viti. There was a young Fijian girl that had lived all her life in Australia. And she came home to Fiji for a visit. And when she was asked what her comment was about coming home after being in Australia all her life, she said, "I've never seen so many Fijians in my life." Talanoa Dialogue is about storytelling. I'll tell you a little story. It's to do with climate change. It's a standard joke that everyone knows that I'm very scared of flying. This morning we came in on British Airways 747 into Heathrow, and it was the scariest landing I've ever come across. Just before it touched down, the wind was so strong, the turbulence was so strong that it took off again. And at the time, I had my earphone on. I was listening to music. So everyone in the plane heard my yelling. And of course, all the Fijian swears. But thank you for coming in numbers this evening. To the distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Bula Vinaka, and a very good evening to you all. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather tonight at the critical phase of our collective struggle to persuade the world to accelerate our response to climate change. And I want to thank you all, and especially our stellar lineup of speakers, for joining me for this landmark event that is part of the Talanoa Dialogue at the heart of Fiji's presidency of the UN climate negotiations. Many of you will know by now that Talanoa is a Pacific concept of decision-making based on an inclusive, respectful exchange of ideas that we use to reach a consensus in our societies about the best way forward. And as COP23 President, I am proud to have led the effort to share this concept from our island homes with the world at large as a tool to accelerate ambition in the climate struggle. In a world in which many forces are trying to undermine our ability to work together, the Talanoa Dialogue may be the greatest legacy of Fiji's COP presidency. as the first small island developing state to preside over the UN negotiations. Already hundreds of sessions such as this have been held all over the world. And the wonderful thing is that these are not merely talk fests, but genuine exchanges of ideas that are leading to more ambition and more action. Right from the start, as COP president, I've been convinced that governments alone cannot effectively confront the climate challenge without also marshalling the ingenuity, enterprise, and commitment of every global citizen. So we have helped forge a grand coalition for climate action encompassing cities, states, and regions, the private sector, civil society, and faith-based groups, and of course, billions of ordinary people around the world. We are deeply honored tonight to have with us a diverse range of powerful, influential, and inspirational voices in the climate struggle. But as I tell my own people, no matter who you are, no matter how old you are, you too can be a climate warrior, an agent for change in the greatest battle of our age, to prevent a breakdown of our climate systems that are now causing stronger and more deadly fires, storms, and floodings to all parts of the world, repair our damaged oceans and lands, and doing so, secure the futures of all 7.5 billion people who call our Earth home, as well as, of course, the generations to come. Talanoa sessions such as this are providing a sharper focus for what must be done, bringing together some of our best minds and those capable of inspiring action to motivate people of goodwill everywhere to embrace the urgency of what we need to do and the ideas that will get us there. As we know, time is running out. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, made a striking observation in the recent documentary to commemorate his 70th birthday. In every other form of human endeavor, he said, we all accept the science. But on climate change, but not on climate change. And I think it is a great tragedy of our times that far too many people of power and influence are ignoring the science, the evidence all around us, because they are putting short-term economic and political interest before our collective long-term interests. Before the sustainability of our environment, our economies, and the very survival of life as we know it. Friends, as you know, Fiji is about to hand over the COP presidency to Poland, and the Polish have adopted as a theme for their presidency for the next 12 months what they call a just transition. I want to say as outgoing COP president that I agree with this, but it must not only be a just transition for those workers, regions and economies affected by the move from dirty energy to clean energy, but a just transition for everyone, and especially the most climate vulnerable. Because natural justice also demands that those human beings who are facing extreme weather events, rising seas, or changes to agriculture also be given the opportunity and the means to properly adapt, to make the transition to a more secure future in a frightening new era that in many instances they've played no part in causing. So friends, we must not only be much more ambitious in reducing greenhouse gas emissions to cap the rise in the average global temperature at 1.5 degrees Celsius over the pre-industrial age, the most ambitious target of the Paris Agreement. We must also be much more ambitious in raising the many billions of dollars needed to finance climate action and adaptation for the most vulnerable, and much more ambitious in continuing to develop alternative clean technologies and making them more affordable and accessible throughout the world. Fiji intends to continue to lead that push for more ambition even after we formally surrender the COP presidency next week, to keep being a voice for decisive climate action, not only for ourselves, but vulnerable people everywhere. And we also intend to keep leading by example, demonstrating to the world that the size of any nation is no impediment to making a significant impact in the climate struggle. I'm very proud that Fiji and our Pacific neighbor, the Marshall Islands, have become the first two nations to commit to raising the ambition of our NDCs by 2020 and to reach net zero emissions by mid-century. Thank you. And we are appealing to all nations to do the same, a call to action from the Pacific on behalf of some of the most vulnerable people on earth. As we say, if we keep on saying, if you can do it, so can you. And as our COP23 presidency draws to an end, I again appeal to leaders everywhere to demonstrate the necessary political will to raise ambition and action to the level required to meet the climate threat and achieve net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest. We know because the scientists have just told us that the window of opportunity is closing fast on us. So the choice we face is very static, very stark. Act decisively to preserve life as we know it and ensure the well-being of our people. Or enter history as the generation that betrayed humanity and recklessly endangered our planet. At the same time, as I keep stressing, other windows of opportunity are opening because however challenging the adjustment may be, the technologies and solutions exist to transform our economic prospects through a more sustainable use of the Earth's resources. And we can and must embrace these technologies and best practices, invest in them, and make them more widely available. Because if we have the courage to do so, we will be opening up new horizons of opportunity for ourselves, our children, and future generations, as well as preserving the only planet we call home. Friends, thank you for your own commitment to the climate struggle, and especially to our distinguished lineup tonight. I'm deeply grateful that you are standing shoulder to shoulder with the Fijian people and other climate vulnerable people throughout the world. And now let's Talanoa for ambition, Talanoa for change. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you for your presidency of COP23 and your continued leadership. That's very inspiring. And now I'm going to hand over to one of the Talanoa partners, the UK Foreign Secretary's Special Representative for Climate Change, Nick Bridge.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Prime Minister. It's an incredibly important and powerful signal that a small island nation, or I prefer to say a large ocean nation, has been leading the COP this year. And the spirit and the soul of Talanoa is, let me tell you, it's just what climate negotiations need. And it's been a fantastic experience to be under your chairmanship. Thank you very much on behalf of the UK government. Now, I have a short time, so I just want to tell one brief story about a journey that is not as well known as it should be in respect of the UK. We are celebrating this week the 10th birthday of the Climate Change Act in the UK, which passed with the biggest majority in Parliament for a century. It passed 10 years ago, and it was the first piece of climate change legislation in the world. And since then, many, many countries have followed down that route. How did it happen? Civil society put together a big ask. Citizens from all across the country, indeed all across the world. Business then came in. The Confederation of British Industry came in with a seminal study with businesses asking for a carbon price. And then it made the job of government much easier. And we got cross-government support for an act that, as I say, passed very, very powerfully and successfully. Now, why does a piece of legislation matter in addition to all the things that are going on out there in society? Well, it set a long-term goal. It preceded the Paris Agreement in saying that we would reduce our emissions by 80% against 1990 levels by 2050. And it wasn't just a nice thing that politicians could say about the future and then do nothing about. It had carbon budgets every 5 years that had to progressively reduce to play our part in tackling climate change. And so we've been on track to reduce those budgets in the UK over the last 10 years. But we get told by our independent climate change committee that when we're off track, we have to do something about it. So we've really begun to see the back and forth of science-based and economic analysis put to the government, who then have to do something about it out there in the real economy. And I'll just give one example of where it's really worked. About 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we had 40% of our power generated by coal. And then, a famous day last year, April the 21st, 0 coal in our mix for the first time since 1882. And coal had its place and has its place still around the world, but it is not compatible. It's the biggest single factor in preventing us stabilize the climate globally. And so we legislated, we had emissions reduction targets alongside the carbon budget, alongside carbon pricing, alongside regulation that encouraged renewable energy. And it's not that well known that we are now the biggest producer of offshore wind in the world. And we brought in offshore wind when it was extremely expensive. And it wasn't just about climate, it was about energy security. And in the last 2 years, the price of that offshore wind has halved. It is now cheaper than new gas. It's 40% cheaper than nuclear, and it's a lot cheaper than coal. We now know that coal is a contributor to the air quality that kills over 4 million people a year around the world. And we have shown, I hope, in just one sector that you can make that transition if you have the support of civil society, you have the support of business, and then you have the will of the political leadership to make that kind of transition. But we have so much more to do in the UK, as we do all over the world. The power sector is the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, but we have now got to really get serious about transport, about industrial processes, about housing, about agriculture. And that journey has only just begun and has to radically, radically accelerate. So last week, on the 10th anniversary of the Climate Change Act, the government asked our independent climate change committee to look again at our level of ambition and whether it was still fit for purpose in the face of the evidence that we've heard, including from the UN 1.5 degrees report. So we will get that evidence, that independent advice in the next few months, and then leading up to 2019 and 2020 as we review the Paris Agreement, we will find out whether the UK can go that step further as well. And I come back to the original comments from Lucy about a planet that's already warmed by 1 degree, and if we go to 2 degrees or more, that, to give just one example, is a world without coral. So the idea that we keep below 2 degrees and 2 degrees is okay, I think has been blown out of the water by that fantastic UN report. And we all now need to look at that whole of economy, whole of society transformation that's good for health, good for jobs, good for the environment, good for the economy. It all adds up, and there's really no reason not to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And talking of health, health is one of the hugely important areas where the impact of climate change is most acutely felt. The World Health Organization is leading the response. Tonight, we are honored to be joined by Dr. Maria Neira, the Director of the Department of Public Health and Environment at the WHO. In a moment, we'll hear from Dr. Neira. First, we have a message from the Director General of the WHO, Dr. Tedros.
Your Excellency, Prime Minister Bainimarama, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to speak to you today. And I'm really sorry I can't be with you in person. Human health depends on the health of our planet. Before my election as Director General, I visited many small island states which suffer most from climate change, even though they're the least responsible. At COP23 last year, I launched the WHO Special Initiative on Small Island Developing States together with Executive Secretary Patricia Espinosa and Prime Minister Bainimarama. Our aim is to ensure that every health facility and health system is resilient to extreme weather events and the health risks of a changing climate. The costs of cutting carbon emissions will pay for themselves in terms of lower health care costs and increased productivity. At COP23, Prime Minister Bainimarama asked us to produce a report on health and climate change. We have been working hard to look forward to presenting that report at COP24 in Poland next week. I can think of no one better to tell you about it than my friend and colleague, Dr. Maria Neira. Thank you for your commitment to the health of our planet and the health of people. I wish you a very successful meeting. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. I will see you tomorrow, I hope. Prime Minister Bula, actually, this is not the word that I heard the most when I was on the islands. The word that I listened very often was paradise. I was attending one of those meetings where many islands from the Pacific were there, the small islands development states, and the word they were all repeating all the time when they were taking the floor is my island, which is the paradise. And then Fiji was coming in, my island, which is more paradise than the previous one. So when it was my turn, I say, I'm from Spain. I'm not from the paradise. It's just a small place, which is very pleasant to live, but I'm afraid it was not the paradise. So if you need somebody to measure and create indicators on how to assess which one is the paradise, I offer my services for that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to talk about something that for me is so critical, health. And let me start by telling you that there are several words, numbers, and colors that are missing in all the climate change negotiations and debates. Let me tell you which ones. The words that we are missing: asthma, chronic obstructive respiratory diseases, lung cancer, stroke, ischemic heart diseases. Those are the words that should be there from the beginning, and unfortunately there are not, and that's why maybe we are not advancing as much as we would like to. So please, we need to start to incorporate those words, because those are the ones that will be very important for the people. They will motivate action, and they will probably engage much more than other type of narrative that we are using. Second, figures that we are missing. Of course, on the climate change negotiations, it's all about figures and cost and everything, but we are missing a critical figure: 7 million deaths. 7 million deaths caused by exposure to air pollution. What a coincidence. When you look at the causes of the air pollution and the causes of climate change, there is a fantastic overlap. And the sectors responsible for the climate change, the greenhouse gas emissions, are very much overlapping with the causes of air pollution. So please, let's accelerate action in the name of those 7 million deaths caused by exposure to air pollution. Bring that number to the negotiations. The third one is color. Which color are we missing? Pink and gray. And you know why? Not pink because the feminine approach or gender or whatever, no. Pink because our normal lungs, the healthy ones, are pink. But when you look at the lungs of children or teenagers in New Delhi, in many places around the world, in Beijing, in many other places, they look totally gray. They are 13 years old, they never smoke, and they look like an 80-year-old gentleman who smoked 3 packages of cigarettes a day. This is the reality. So please, if we don't have action because we have to negotiate, because there are economic reasons, do it on the name of that pink and gray lung. Cost is another thing that is not incorporated there. Yes, I know that on the climate negotiations, you talk a lot about the cost, the investments, the trades-off and everything, but you are not taking into consideration that health effects of exposure to air pollution and climate change is costing us billions. The taxpayers are paying billions, your taxpayers, everybody's taxpayers, because we need to fill those hospitals, we need to treat those patients. Those are chronic respiratory diseases, chronic diseases that are affecting all of us, including our intelligence and IQ, because children exposed to air pollution will be affected by that. And that generates an incredible cost for our health system, for our society, and of course, the well-being of the people we are treating. So let me now, since I am a medical doctor, I think by now you all have understand that I am a medical doctor, let me tell you what is my recipe for ambition, for acceleration, what is my prescription for health. One, on all the climate change negotiation discussions, Talanoa groups, whatever, please make sure that near to the image of the planet, the lovely planet that we always use, put a couple of lungs, okay? Okay, anytime you have a little planet or a little polar bear, put as well a couple of lungs. Okay, if possible, you can put one pink, one gray. I have plenty of images, I can pass those to you. You can use it, feel free, WHO is using it for free, no intellectual protection, right? So use it, this is one. Second, please make to the museum, make to the past, make the fossil fuels. I mean, coal is killing us. And here is my story, Prime Minister. I grew up in Asturias, in a place in Spain where we had some economic development because, that was the argument, because the mining and because the coal. And believe me, people were sick. And when I started my career as a medical doctor, the first thing I did it was to go to the hospital to collect the horrible sputum of the patients, 40 years old, with their lungs horrible, with this very black, I don't want to describe it, but it was very disgusting. Anyway, they were sick and they were very, very young because they were inhaling all of this coal every day. Make those fossil fuels fossils and a fossil idea. Let's accelerate this energy transition in the name of health. Let's make a healthy energy transition. The benefits of moving into transitioning into a healthy energy source will be amazing on the economy, of course, on development, but on the health of the people. And this is something that will move mountains. If you pass the right message to your population, if you start to use the health arguments, forget about climate change. Tell them that this is about a better, more sustainable transport system that will allow a less sedentary lifestyle and therefore less chronic diseases, less diabetes, less sedentary lifestyle and obesity and all the metabolic syndrome-related diseases. Tell your people that they will breathe better air, better quality of the air, and therefore they will reduce asthma. Moms will be mobilized for that. They will move mountains as well. And tell people that this is interesting for your economy as well. So my anecdote will be that I don't want anymore to be able to tell anyone that if they are working at the healthcare facility in Africa, as I did, or in other countries on developing phase, I was using a kerosene lamp to take care of my patients during the night because electricity was not available. While in Africa, the sun was certainly there. So I don't want to see anymore a young doctor taking care of patients with a kerosene lamp, which will be an incredible bad thing for the health of the people. So do more, let's accelerate on the name of the health, and one day, hopefully, air pollution will be like tobacco, something that socially is not accepted. And when a Marlboro guy was saying, Bob, I'm a cowboy, and it was so fashion, WHO did something else. WHO says, Bob, I got cancer. And that was less glamorous. Soon, we will be doing the same with the fossil fuels. Fossil fuels heals people, and this has to stop. Thank you very much.
It's amazing. Thank you. Dr. Nera, you're very motivating. Very motivating. So a request for more pink lungs. I think we should also have more pink hair, which brings me to our next guest, of whom I'm a huge admirer. Please welcome entrepreneur and founder of Dot Everyone, a think tank that champions responsible technology for a fairer future, Baroness Martha Lane Fox. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's pretty easy to feel depressed, isn't it? Every week you feel as though you're going to read about another species that's been wiped out. Well, tonight you get a rare sighting because you are actually looking at a very, very rare species, a dot-com dinosaur. I was walking down the street recently and a younger person came up to me and said, "I know who you are," sort of jabbing me, and I thought, hooray, I'm famous again for a little bit. "You're that dot-com dinosaur." And I thought, oh no, age 45, that's not very good, is it? But in a way, they were kind of right, because I remember the world before the internet, which, looking at the faces in this room, you might make me feel I'm probably insane, because what? Was that really a world? And I'd like to tell you a bit about my journey through technology and why I feel like we haven't even begun to deploy it as we should in order to help the maximum number of people address the problems and come up with the solutions with the challenges that we're talking about this evening. So back in 98, when I started my business, lastminute.com, it felt as though this new revolution was going to change the world, that we were going to create a redistributive, democratizing, incredible force where new voices, young voices like mine at that point, people from all over the world were going to be able to come up with different kinds of solutions to the challenges that they had, starting businesses, starting political parties, starting campaigns, starting movements. And it really did feel like an exciting time back in those early days, and I feel so lucky to have been a part of it here in the UK. But it would be hard to argue that that's where we'd ended up. I sort of lived in my weird bubble of building a company in those days, and I fast forward a few years, fell out of a car, my life changed quite a lot. I was very proud to become the UK's digital champion for prime ministers. And I started seeing the world of technology through a very different lens, because I was tasked to look at all the people that had never heard of the internet, had never used it, whose lives and the situations they were facing were really tough, and the last thing that they were going to be hassled about was whether they had a broadband connection. But it really started me on a journey to thinking about how we use technology and the people that we are empowering to come up with the solutions to the things that we need to solve in the future. I was really struck when I visited an extremely run-down area of Bristol here in the UK, the third poorest bit of the city and one of the most deprived pieces of the whole country. And when I went there, they said, "We're going to show you our incredible new Wizzy internet centre." And I was like, really? This is a very, very unhappy place. Do they really need an internet centre in this area? But actually, it was amazing, because guess what? The people were using the tools provided by that media centre, internet centre, to build things that meant something to them. They were building websites to organise cleaning up all of the area, to put recycling together, to grow plants and vegetables that they would then sell, because there weren't any Ocado vans going into that bit of the world. And it was amazing to watch how just giving the tools to this community had enabled them to reinvent their futures. Now, I live with a marine conservationist who started a marine conservation charity called the Blue Marine Foundation. And our home life can be a bit frenetic, mainly because he spends the whole time saying to me, "Why are you going on about the internet? You should be worrying about the planet, and specifically fish and the oceans." And I spend a lot of time saying, "But I don't really know anything about the planet and the oceans and fish. I'm not a climate expert." And then the scales fell from my eyes, and I thought, screw that. Unless people like me who understand a little about technology, and I can't code, don't tell anyone, because some people still think I can, but I really can't. Unless people like me who have a voice and understand a little bit about the tools of the modern age don't keep fighting to encourage the maximum number of people to have access to these tools and use them, then I don't think we're going to have a very good chance to get the best possible future for all of us. And this is happening to a degree, but not fast enough. And what I find frustrating is that my own sector, the technology sector, is all about innovation, speed, pace, change at scale, making things better, inventing new things, and yet they seem somewhat absent from the technology and the climate debate. And I want to encourage all of you to think about using technology for what it was designed for, which is raising unknown voices, collaborating together, building tools to enable a more bright future. I think it's essential that we focus on the people that are hardest to reach, because inherently they are going to be the people most affected by climate change. And yet they are often the people that are excluded from the technology revolution. And this really matters. Half the world is still not online. It's easy to forget that in all of our filter bubbles and frenzied hashtagging, but half the world is still not online. And yet you don't need to be a scientist to know that those people are the people that are going to be most directly affected by the climate crisis, partly because they may be living near a road or going to a school that has heavy pollution, partly because they may be in a fishing community that's been decimated because of the commercial fishing. There may be hundreds of other reasons. But we know that more access to more information and the tools that enable you to build a business, find like-minded people, organize your communities are going to be the tools that are helpful. So I am demanding a more responsible use of technology. I want governments to put the internet and associated technologies at the heart of how they think about solving for the climate crisis. I see a worrying absence of technological vision in all of our political leaders. We need to be saying, it's not okay. We live in 2018, not 1818. We can't solve the climate crisis just with bits of paper. We need everybody on the planet to have the maximum shot at suggesting solutions and creating solutions. And that will happen if we give them access to the internet, access to smart technologies, and we really fight to involve people in the conversations that perhaps before have never been involved. Now, this is happening in sporadic bursts. You know, I sit on the board of Twitter, and you can find hundreds of exciting hashtags and campaign movements that are being built. The Black Lives Matter campaign has got a subgroup all about Black lives coming together to solve climate issues, and they have meetups and they do things in their local community. There's a brilliant woman here in the UK who started something called Zero Waste Week. I'm sure many of you are familiar. Again, saw massive traction and became a real campaign when she was using the social media tools that we have. But this is only the start. We can do so much more. Governments can do so much more if they embed digital technologies more in how they're thinking about the solutions. We can do more if we use technology in a more creative way. And I've absolutely no doubt that companies, particularly the technology companies, can do more themselves. So I believe passionately in technology. I'm not a techno-utopian. I don't think it can solve all the ills of the world, but I absolutely believe that we have not even begun to use it, what it was designed for, to help us solve for the things that really matter. We don't need more pizza delivery services. We do need fishermen to be able to understand the nature of the fish in the places that they work, to be able to sell their fish at the right price, and to be able to send that data so that it can be shared on global levels. So I urge you to think about technology, think about the spread of technology, not just here for the people in this room who I'm sure are all on your smartphones, but for the people who are far removed from the hallowed halls of the Royal Institution. I am optimistic. I heard recently that John Kerry, before his Oceans Conference, had a fish hackathon. I'm not quite sure how to abbreviate that. A fishathon? I'm not sure. But they came up with lots of incredible ways that technology could help fishermen around the world. Now, as you can tell, I've been brainwashed by my partner about fish. So if nothing else, we need to empower more people with technology so that he just stays off my case at home. Not only will we have a happier planet, but we'll have a happier Lane Fox household. So help me. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Martha. It's often about making the global local. So yes, exactly. Our next speaker this evening is a multi-award-winning storyteller in many respects. Her medium is the song, and she happens to be rather good at those. She's also a UN Environment Goodwill Ambassador who tirelessly communicates with her global fan base on climate justice and ambition. It is our honour to have her here with us this evening. Please welcome singer, writer and producer Ellie Goulding.
Very nice. Good evening, everybody. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Thank you for being here, and to everyone watching on the live feed, hello. We know this is a critical point that decides all of our futures. In fact, you know things are very serious when you get me to do public speaking. In truth, I'm much more comfortable with songs. Public speaking has never really been my favorite pastime. But my passion for the natural world has given me the opportunity to visit the front line of climate change. And I know not everyone gets this opportunity, so that's why I make myself speak out and tell my story. In fact, it's thanks to the Talanoa dialogue that people like me who are much more comfortable on a different platform, or those who are often overlooked entirely, has been given the confidence to tell their story. In the Talanoa system, the personal matters. It's easy to talk when you know that others are respectfully listening. In this way, Fiji's presidency of COP23 has thrown open its arms to all sorts of responses to climate change. Not just tonight, but throughout the year. What a smart and important move. The stories you have gathered and amplified have pressed the empathy button, broadened debate, and articulated our collective ambition. Often this is peer-to-peer, with young people sharing their perspective with each other. But critically, Talanoa collects our stories and feeds into the Paris Agreement. Songs are my speciality, and indeed songs are condensed stories. They're parcels of intense experience, some wisdom, advice, and ambition. A great song will often create a feeling that can't be shaken. The same is true of an encounter with the natural world on the brink of climate change. The photo you see of me in bright orange brings back a flood of memories. To promote Earth Hour 2018, I traveled with scientists to Greenland's largest glacier. Standing by the carving margin of Jakobshavn Glacier was completely otherworldly. Your brain has to try and make sense that this beautiful and enormous glacier is disappearing before our eyes. Standing in its presence is really an assault on the senses. Even in that jacket, in the cold, there's a crackle in the air and an almost imperceptible sound of ice shifting. All of my senses were on edge. I think that's what they call an overload. So it doesn't surprise me when I hear from one of the greatest climate scientists of our age that this is where he brings influential climate skeptics. By the time he has coaxed them to the glacier, he's bombarded them with facts. But it's only when they feel, as I did, that sensory overload that they truly get it. In common with great songs, the stories of the Talanoa dialogue cut through the noise because they're personal and true. They tell us exactly how it feels to be on the front line of climate change. They communicate the genuine excitement of radical positive change. They challenge, stir emotions, and offer a glimpse of the world liberated from fossil fuel dogma and pollution. They hold our fears and our ambition together. My mandate comes from my fans, many of whom are young and stepping into adulthood with huge ambitions for their future. For this reason, I won't let our climate ambitions become diluted. The deals currently on the table would condemn them to a limited future, which is not acceptable. To borrow from Cristiana Figueira's, emissions reductions today are much more important than emissions reductions tomorrow. That's our goal, because it gives us more options. After that comes more ambition, carbon neutrality by 2050. On the eve of the critical COP24 political discussions in Poland, our stories add up to a powerful message that cannot be drowned out. To the political negotiators, we need you to step up. Prioritize our ambition for a just and peaceful world. Do not try and negotiate with the science. That science, the evidence, should not be fought against. Instead, use it as your rocket fuel, enabling you to be as ambitious for our future as we are. Thank you.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, Ellie. You say you don't like public speaking, but I don't know. Good at it. We now have a 20-minute intermission coming up. There'll be drinks outside if you really want to get into the Talanoa spirits. For those of us joining us by the live stream, we haven't forgotten about you, and there'll be a program of films about Talanoa while we're away. But before we go to the break, let's hear from Max Edkins, who is the program lead for Connect for Climate at the World Bank, and another Talanoa partner. He's going to say a few words, and you should note his lovely bow tie as well. Over to you, Max.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prime Minister Bainimarama. You have been an incredible leader. We've got incredible climate leaders in the House today. We know we're faced by a crisis, but that crisis is our opportunity. And that is why I just want to say that I'm excited to be alive today, because we together can build a future. We can make history right here, right now, and we can make sure that we are building a decarbonized and resilient future. So congratulations on the Talanoa dialogue. There's no more important time than now to make climate change emotional, to share the knowledge, to ensure that we all feel part of this grand transition that we're setting ourselves upon. So we from the Connect for Climate program of the World Bank are going to be sharing 2 videos today. The first is a video that highlights global leadership from the One Planet Summit, calling for us to step up on climate action. And the second highlights that young people, that the youth of today are unstoppable. They are the driving force that are implementing the technologies and the solutions that are energized by what we need to do to build the future that we want to embrace. So just a quote: "We must globally warm our hearts, and we must change the climate of our souls to ensure that we transition to a low-carbon, decarbonized future." And that is the future that we must embrace now. And that's why I've put on this jacket, because this is the jacket that I wore to my graduation. So all together, let's make sure that we save the future.
Oh, the videos first?
And focus on
The videos now?
Climate change is still running faster than we are.
We are now in a race against time.
It is time to stop fighting the old system and start creating a new system.
Collectively, it's time to decide what kind of future we want.
We're at a moment of high risk, but also great promise.
The cost of not acting is higher than the cost of acting.
The companies who are the most sustainable are going to be the companies that have the best financial returns.
Price carbon, tax it, remove the subsidies.
The shift to low-carbon resilient economies could translate into $26 trillion new dollars.
Technology is on our side, and the green economy offers a path to prosperity.
Climate action is not only possible and necessary, but it is also beneficial for the economy and the people.
It's time to step up.
This is about the future of this planet.
It's about a new paradigm. We now factor climate into everything we do.
What we need is action
to make it happen.
We can win this race.
We can win the battle to save our planet.
We owe it to younger generations.
See, we will get out of this mess like we have always gotten out of things. Together.
With unity, we will, and indeed we must, succeed.
We must globally warm our hearts and change the climate of our souls.
We have to dream big.
To scale up climate action.
Do not give up.
the art of storytelling. It's how we share our opinions, our challenges, our knowledge, and our lives. It's also how we inspire positive change. Every culture has its own tradition of storytelling. In Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa, storytelling is known as Talanoa. And it is a powerful tool in motivating people to build consensus and take action. Talanoa allows us to have difficult discussions in an open, inclusive, and solutions-oriented way. This is why we're asking everyone to participate in the Talanoa dialogue, to openly and respectfully share stories about climate change from their perspective and how it is affecting their lives, their communities, and the world. But these discussions must be more than just talk. Through Talanoa, we must reach mutual understanding and empathy, and make wise decisions for the collective good. Through Talanoa, we must inform, motivate, and drive more ambitious action that helps achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. Action that will create greater awareness, change minds, and inspire solutions that can help us limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Because at the moment, with the current level of global commitment, we are heading for a catastrophic 3 degrees of warming. And so we need all levels of government, civil society, the private sector, and the scientific community to take part. There will be no finger pointing or laying blame. That is not what Talanoa is about. As Frank Bainimarama, the Honorable Prime Minister of Fiji and President of COP23 often says, when it comes to climate change, we are all in the same canoe. So it is now that we ask you, in whatever capacity you are participating in the Talanoa dialogue, to be prepared to tell stories and provide solutions that address each of the 3 central questions. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? Contributions should be clear, concise, and constructive, and focus on specific examples of progress from which others can learn. Consider how your contribution supports the 1.5 degree goal and how it can help countries implement and enhance their climate commitments. Ask, how do I want to shape the dialogue that political leaders will be having at COP24? What do I want world leaders to agree to and to pledge in Poland? In telling your story, consider addressing the 3 questions from your own perspective. You shape the dialogue and its outcomes by sharing where you would like to be and what enabling factors you require in order to get there. Let's Talanoa for ambition together. Let's positively and constructively decide how to paddle our canoe further, faster, together.
Climate change makes not only me, like the whole village, worried about what will happen next. So we always prepared for everything.
The whole economy around the rural areas depend on the environment. They get their food from the environment, they get their livelihoods, what they take to the market to get money to support and buy other things. This all depends on the environment. And when the environment changes due to climate change, all this is affected.
The patterns is changing. The tracks of tropical cyclones are also changing and it's becoming much more unpredictable. So it is posing us a huge challenge in terms of providing those information.
In Fiji, we are encouraging the use of renewable energy, like solar, and also building of seawalls, relocations of people living on the vulnerable coastline.
The solar system can be owned by the sun. If the cyclone comes or anything comes, we can't get the electricity in this community. And the flow water can go to the community, never mind if the electricity gone off, to provide this water to them.
Badu wato toke tuka sagando kunga na matakanya na singanindai arosa ni mai bibu ko bale ube kiman.
The first relocation exercise that took place in Fiji took place in a village in the Northern Division, that is Bunindongaloa village.
Ve saulil raki kena ve toki taki na mitoki mai na bukuni tumbuni wai se walubu se masusunengele sa rui saulevu. Ni watu tobataka ni mabitoki mai. Iyo dua la ngada bibi ke rauti biti binaka. Rauta da Pasifika.
Mai bale ngai kine rto bitana leni bubale na babuna bekani to mai tokina krobo.
Communities assist people, whatever we can do to assist community in trying to look at climate change and what is there to adapt to climate change.
Climate change is affecting Fiji in many ways. We've got about 60 years of data that we have analyzed and seen that the air temperatures are rising much faster than the global average. When we look at the variability in rainfall, there is a high variability from one year to the other. The sea levels are rising. There are a number of communities, coastal communities, they are being affected, and they are also being relocated to the higher grounds.
Looking at the long-term projection for rainfall in Kiribati will be increased. The sea has been warmed, and that's contributed to a lot of impact in terms of the marine ecosystem.
Ebon nang dosira dena no kawag kaya manan ni meuna na kwa bera ke manan wari.
The Department of Meteorology is adapting to the climate changes that we are facing, especially in terms of predicting the weather events, so that they are able to provide specific, accurate and timely information for all communities.
We are monitoring very closely the changing weather patterns within the geographical regions in Fiji. Fiji is scattered within the South Pacific Ocean, and we need to react quickly when disasters do strike. We are looking at the best agricultural practices and even technology to assist us so that we can continue to produce for the domestic market and likewise for our export markets as well, because agriculture is so important for the Fijian economy.
Weather monitoring in Kiribati is quite limited. Our office haven't got the full equipment and capacity to maintain our work, especially in weather monitoring. Out of the many islands, we only have 5 operational stations. We are looking at more support and funding support in terms of improving the weather observation.
We are looking forward to the partners and donors to provide technologies that is more relevant for the Pacific Island countries, including Fiji.
Fiji is not the only country affected. It is a global concern. And Fiji is doing all it can in terms of its NDCs and of course adaptation and mitigation plans so that we can contribute.
The threat from climate change is real, urgent, serious, and is growing overnight. Are you ready to face life without Earth? Have you contemplated what will happen if we ignore this reality, this nightmare? My home, my school, our source of food was totally destroyed. My life was in chaos.
Does it affect us? Yes, every single person on this earth has the power to change the world. This is the time to work and do something to slow down the rising of sea level. Let us together, hand in hand, start our preparation in solving a problem caused by climate change and make our country a very beautiful place to live on.
Climate change is still running faster than we are.
We are now in a race against time.
It is time to stop fighting the old system and start creating a new system.
Collectively, it's time to decide what kind of future we want.
We're at a moment of high risk, but also great promise.
The cost of not acting is higher than the cost of acting.
The companies who are the most sustainable are going to be the companies that have the best financial returns.
Price carbon, tax it, remove the subsidies.
The shift to low-carbon resilient economies could translate into $26 trillion new dollars.
Technology is on our side, and the green economy offers a path to prosperity.
Climate action is not only possible and necessary, but it is also beneficial for the economy and the people.
It's time to step up.
This is about the future of this planet.
It's about a new paradigm.
We now factor climate into everything we do.
What we need is action
to make it happen.
We can win this race.
We can win the battle to save our planet.
We owe it to younger generations.
See, we will get out of this mess like we have always gotten out of things. Together.
With unity, we will, and indeed we must, succeed.
We must globally warm our hearts and change the climate of our souls.
We have to dream big.
To scale up climate action.
Do not give up.
The art of storytelling. It's how we share our opinions, our challenges, our knowledge, and our lives. It's also how we inspire positive change. Every culture has its own tradition of storytelling. In Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa, storytelling is known as Talanoa. And it is a powerful tool in motivating people to build consensus and take action. Talanoa allows us to have difficult discussions in an open, inclusive, and solutions-oriented way. This is why we're asking everyone to participate in the Talanoa dialogue, to openly and respectfully share stories about climate change from their perspective and how it is affecting their lives, their communities, and the world. But these discussions must be more than just talk. Through Talanoa, we must reach mutual understanding and empathy, and make wise decisions for the collective good. Through Talanoa, we must inform, motivate, and drive more ambitious action that helps achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. Action that will create greater awareness, change minds, and inspire solutions that can help us limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Because at the moment, with the current level of global commitment, we are heading for a catastrophic 3 degrees of warming. And so we need all levels of government, civil society, the private sector, and the scientific community to take part. There will be no finger pointing or laying blame. That is not what Talanoa is about. As Frank Bainimarama, the Honorable Prime Minister of Fiji and President of COP23 often says, when it comes to climate change, we are all in the same canoe. So it is now that we ask you, in whatever capacity you are participating in the Talanoa dialogue, to be prepared to tell stories and provide solutions that address each of the three central questions. Where are we now?